This is lecture 32, and I want to talk about nudges. Nudges famous from Sunstein and Thaler's famous book, Nudge, of how we change behavior even if we don't change prices. So a nudge is a non-price incentive, such as a piece of information, and Los Angeles public health has been improved by restaurants issuing these public health report cards, A, B, C, signaling to potential customers the public health rating of the restaurant. And my colleague Phil Leslie and a colleague at Maryland have done terrific work documenting the causal effects of issuing such reports. Another example of nudges are when you're at a hotel and they remind you with the water and the towels, do you really need your towels to be recycled? Do you really need fresh towels? Of how much water could be saved if you don't throw your towels on the ground and reuse them. Another prominent example is the company Power's home energy reports. And in the next slide, I show you an example. So here's an example of an important nudge. Power has designed this very nice product where electric utilities email or send letters to households where they learn how each household's electricity consumption. So in this case, you consuming 2,714 kilowatts in the last month, how you compare to all of your neighbors, 1,200, that they on average were consuming 1,297, versus your most efficient neighbors who were consuming 881 units of power. And this peer comparison is supposed to motivate you to change your game, that this is a nudge if you have relatively high consumption to reduce your electricity consumption. Notice there's no price incentive here. This is just a message, a normative message. And this matters because all throughout the United States, as we think about reducing our carbon emissions and electricity coming from fossil fuels like natural gas and coal, there's a question of which incentives are politically palatable. We've tried appliance codes. Of course, an economist would say raise electricity prices, especially at peak times, but that can be politically hard to do, and public utility commissions can be slow to be willing to pass on such costs to consumers because that lowers real incomes. Nudges are a more acceptable approach to modify behavior. There's a question how effective they are. A social science question that interests me very much is, do all people respond in the identical way when they're nudged? Or a point that comes out of more and more social science literature, are there heterogeneous treatment effects? And my own research with Dora Costa has examined whether a household's environmentalism, an exogenous person, household-specific characteristics, how does a household's environmentalism, whether they're environmentalists or not, mediate how they respond to a given nudge, whether it's the water treatment nudge or receiving an Power nudge. And we can look at a variety of evidence that liberals and conservatives live their lives differently. This is state-level evidence covering the years 1960 to the early 2000s. And you're supposed to see from this slide electricity consumption per capita. And notice this divergence between Republican states, the red states, and liberal states, the blue states, and especially California. Back in 1966, when I was born, yes, the liberal states consumed less electricity than red Republican states. But look today at this divergence. Ideology seems to be playing an increasing role. There's a question of why this relationship exists. Is this energy-intensive industry moving to red states? Is this differences in residential behavior? This is an interesting decomposing this into its components is interesting, but here you see the total effect of this by calendar year, this difference in environmental performance as a function of ideology of the average people who live there. Conservative states contributing more to climate change than liberal states. One interpretation is liberal states such as California walking the walk, and even without explicit price incentives, in the absence of a carbon tax, taking steps to try to reduce the externality associated with day-to-day activity. In my own work, I've dug in, so here is a map of Los Angeles, and what I want you to see, this is sort of a fun picture, using RL Polk data on Prius registrations by zip code. I want you to see that there's this correlation that more liberal areas are more likely to have more Priuses registered there. And so this is just a univariate map. Ryan Vaughn and I studied this in a paper that was published a couple of years ago. Look up Kahn and Vaughn if you're interested in this correlation between the types of cars people buy and environmental ideology. So many electric utilities have been issuing home energy reports, and based on a randomized treatment design, it appears that the average treatment effect is about a 2% reduction in electricity when households are issued one of these reports at roughly a monthly frequency. And here again is a graph similar to that Florida graph we saw before of how neighbors compare of what a home energy report looks at like. A very useful report. What interests me is, do environmentalists and non-environmentalists respond differently to this treatment? In my own research, we've taken a look at how liberals and conservatives respond. Do they respond in the same way to such treatments? There's reasons to believe that they might not. So Riley Dunlop, a sociologist from the Midwest, has documented this divergence between Republicans and Democrats over time, that more and more Democrats believe that climate change is playing out, while for Republicans, the share saying that the effects of global warming have begun has actually shrunk. So between 1997 and 2008, there's been a divergence on this issue, which suggests that something like a home energy report might trigger a heterogeneous effect. What we found when we took a look at distributing these home energy reports is we in fact did find that liberal households responded by reducing their electricity consumption more than conservative households given roughly the same report. And so